The $20 bill was still on the bar when I got back from the restroom. It sat beneath a folded cocktail napkin, the kind printed with the restaurant's logo in gold. I stood there for a moment, not touching it, just reading the words my son had written in his neat, careful handwriting. "Thanks for stopping by, Mom. It got late, we moved on. Safe drive home, Kevin." The bar stool beside mine still held the slight warmth of where he'd been sitting. The ice in my water glass hadn't fully melted yet. He couldn't have been gone more than 4 minutes. I picked up the 20. I held it the way you hold something you don't quite recognize, even when you know exactly what it is. Then I set it back down, folded it once, and tucked it into my coat pocket. Not because I wanted it, because I needed something to hold on to for the next few minutes while I decided how I was going to breathe. The bartender caught my eye and looked away fast. He'd seen the whole thing. "My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse, most of them in the cardiac unit at Mercy General in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have seen people leave this world with their hands in mine. I have sat with strangers in the quietest hours of the night and held the space between fear and what comes next. I know what it means to stay. I raised Kevin alone from the time he was 9. His father and I divorced without ceremony, one long exhale, after years of holding our breath. I kept the house, kept the bills, kept my son. I worked doubles when I had to, traded shifts with colleagues who understood, kept his lunch packed and his homework signed and his sports fees paid. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it was mine to do. When Kevin was accepted into the MBA program at Chapel Hill, I drove him there myself, helped him carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs. On the way home, I cried in the car with the radio off, not from sadness, but from something that felt like completion. He was going to be fine. He was going to be more than fine, and he was. He built a career in financial consulting, the kind that earns you a title with multiple syllables and a parking spot with your name on it. I was proud of him. I am still proud of him. That part doesn't change. Lena came 4 years after Chapel Hill. She was sharp and attractive and stood the way people stand when they've always been confident the room would arrange itself around them. I tried to like her. I did like her, at first, the way you like the idea of someone before the details come in. She shook my hand at our first meeting instead of hugging me, which I took for reserve rather than distance. I told myself some people just take time. They moved into a house in Morrisville a year after the wedding. A nice house, 4 bedrooms, a yard, a kitchen that had more counter space than my whole first apartment. Kevin called it a starter home, which made me smile, because it was nicer than anything I'd owned in 30 years of working. After their son was born, they called me. Not right away, but when the daycare fell through, when the nanny quit, when Lena went back to work 6 weeks postpartum, and Kevin's travel schedule made things complicated. I came. That's what I do. For the next 3 years, I was at their house 4 days a week. I fed Owen his breakfast and drove him to preschool and picked him up when Lena had a late meeting. I cooked dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays so there was something in the refrigerator when they got home tired. I fixed the leaky bathroom faucet with a YouTube video and a wrench from Kevin's garage because calling a plumber was going to cost $200. They said they didn't have that week. When their second child came, a girl they named Avery, I was in the waiting room for 6 hours. I brought a casserole. I held Avery the day they brought her home, and she fit against my chest like she already knew me. I never asked for money. It was never offered. The one time I mentioned, very carefully, that gas was getting expensive with the commute 4 days a week, Lena said, "We really do appreciate everything you do," in a tone that sounded more like a boundary than a response. Kevin nodded along. I didn't bring it up again. I co-signed for their SUV when their credit wasn't ready. I wired Kevin $3,000 the spring they had a gap between closing on the new house and receiving the sale proceeds from the old one. He said he'd pay it back in 30 days. That was 22 months ago. I'm not telling you this to build a case. I'm telling you so that when I describe what happened at Anella's last Thursday night, you understand the weight that was already in the room before I walked through the door. Kevin was promoted to regional director in October. It was a real achievement, the kind that takes years to earn, and I was genuinely happy for him. When he called to tell me, I was standing in my kitchen, and I sat down at the table because my knees went soft with something that felt like pride and relief at once. I told him I loved him. I told him his father would have been proud, which I don't usually say, but I meant. 2 weeks after that, Lena sent me a text. Kevin's work is throwing him a little celebration dinner at Anella's on the 14th. You should come. 7 o'clock. Dress nice. I texted back that I would be there. I bought a new blouse. Dark green, simple, the kind of thing I don't usually spend money on, but it felt like an occasion. I got my hair done on Saturday. I arrived at Anella's at 10 to 7, which is how I always arrive places early enough to settle. Not so early, I'm a burden. The hostess looked at the reservation list twice, and then a third time with her finger tracing the names. I don't see a Holloway, she said, in a voice that was apologetic but also final, the way a door sounds when it closes. I told her that was all right, that I was Kevin Holloway's mother, and that perhaps I was under a different name. She checked again. She called over the manager on duty, a young man who smelled like cedar and seemed genuinely concerned. He checked his screen, looked at me, and said, "There's a reservation for 14. We're completely seated." I told him not to worry. I'd wait at the bar. I found Kevin before he found me. He was near the back of the restaurant at a long table set with white linens and small candles. His colleagues were there, 8 or 9 of them, people I recognized from the company holiday cards he'd forwarded over email the past few years. 2 couples I didn't know, Lena at his right side, already laughing at something, her glass raised. I lifted my hand when Kevin glanced toward the bar. He saw me. Something moved across his face, not surprise exactly, more like recalibration. He said something to Lena. She turned, found me, and smiled the smile she uses when something has become inconvenient. She came over. "Oh, Margaret," she said, in that particular tone. "I completely forgot to tell you we ended up filling the table. Kevin's company arranged seats for the whole team, plus their partners." She gestured vaguely toward the private dining area. "You know how these things get away from you." I said that I understood. "The bar is lovely, though," she added, already turning back. "You can still be here for the celebration." So I sat at the bar. I ordered sparkling water. I watched my son accept a framed commendation from his company president while his colleagues applauded, and Lena tucked her hand through his arm, and the whole table glowed with a warmth I could see from 30 feet away, but could not reach. No one came to get me. Not once during the dinner, not during the toasts, not during the dessert course that arrived on a long tray carried by 2 servers. I heard Kevin's name said 11 times, by my count, and his mother's name not once. Around 9 o'clock, I needed to use the restroom. I was gone, perhaps 6 minutes. When I came back, the bar stool next to mine held a folded napkin and a $20 bill. I sat there for a while after, not because I was deciding what to do. I had already decided, somewhere between the elevator and the sink, with cold water on my wrists and my reflection in the mirror showing me a woman standing very straight. I was deciding how to feel about all of it. And what I settled on, slowly, like water finding its level, was something simpler than rage. Clarity. "Can I get you anything else?" the bartender asked. "Actually," I said, "is Dominic working tonight?" He looked at me differently then, not with suspicion, with something closer to recognition. "Mr. Ferrara is in the back office," he said. "Do you want me to?" "Just tell him Margaret Holloway is here," I said. "He'll know. I met Dominic Ferrara 11 years ago, when his mother Elena was transferred to my unit after her second cardiac event. She was 73, small, fierce, with silver hair she wore pinned back, and opinions she delivered without preface. She spoke almost no English. Dominic came every day without fail, translated for the medical staff, slept in the waiting room when visiting hours ended. He was 29 years old and already managing 2 of his father's restaurants, while his older brothers, as he put it, found reasons to be busy elsewhere. I took extra time with Elena, not because it was my job, though it was, but because she reminded me of my grandmother, and because loneliness is its own kind of illness when you are far from the people who understand your language. I learned 5 phrases in Italian over the course of her stay. I brought her a small plant for her bedside table. When she was discharged, she held my hands for a long time and said something I asked Dominic to translate. "She says you gave her back her appetite," he said. "She means for living." Elena died 2 years later, peacefully, at home. Dominic sent me flowers and a card I kept in a drawer for a long time after. When he opened Anella's named for his mother, he sent me an invitation to the opening. I went alone. I sat at the bar and had the best pasta of my life, and he came and sat with me for 20 minutes and told me about her last years, and we were both quietly glad to be there. We stayed in touch, the way you stay in touch with people who matter, in an irregular but permanent way. Occasional messages, a card at Christmas, once running into each other at a farmer's market and talking for an hour in the middle of the aisle while people stepped around us. He came through the kitchen door 3 minutes after the bartender disappeared into the back. He was older than I remembered, heavier through the shoulders, with the kind of tired that a successful restaurateur wears on Thursday nights. But when he saw me, he smiled the way people smile when they see someone they genuinely didn't expect to be glad to see. "Margaret." He took my hand in both of his. "I didn't know you were here tonight." "I was here for my son's celebration dinner," I said. I ended up at the bar. His smile did something complicated. He glanced once toward the private dining room, where the party had thinned to half a dozen people and the white linens were rumpled and the last of the wine was being finished. Then he looked back at me. "Tell me," he said, and pulled out the stool beside me and sat down. I told him. Not dramatically, I'm not a dramatic person. I told him, the way you brief a colleague, in order, without editorializing. The invitation, the missing reservation, the bar, the toast, the napkin, with $20 folded inside it. He listened without interrupting, which is a rarer quality than it should be. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want to comp your evening." I shook my head. "There's nothing to comp. I had sparkling water. Then I want to offer you dinner." "Dominic." He met my eyes. "What do you need?" I thought about it honestly. Not what I wanted. Wanting felt like the wrong instrument. What I actually needed, from this moment. From this particular quiet Thursday night with my new blouse and my son's $20 bill in my pocket. "I don't need anything tonight," I said. "But I'd like to tell you one more thing." He nodded. "They'll probably make a reservation here again," I said. "Kevin and Lena. She posts about this restaurant. It's on her list of places she takes clients." He was watching me steadily. "If there's ever a reason to decline," I said, "I'll leave that to your judgment." He looked at me for a long moment. The restaurant moved around us, servers clearing tables, the soft percussion of a kitchen winding down. Then he nodded once, the way a person nods when they've already understood something before you've finished saying it. "I have a good memory for names," he said. I finished my water. He walked me to the door himself, insisted on calling me a car. We said goodbye the way old friends do, briefly, warmly, without needing to say everything. In the car home, I looked out the window at the city going dark around me, and I thought about Elena Ferrara and her silver hair and the plant I'd put on her bedside table and all the small things that accumulate over a lifetime, without any plan, connecting you to people and places in ways you couldn't have designed if you'd tried. The messages came the next day, as I expected. Kevin called in the morning, voice measured, the tone he uses when he's been coached by Lena on what to say. "Hey, Mom. Sorry, last night was a little chaotic. The company kind of took over the evening. We'll do something just us soon, okay?" I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I set my phone face down on the kitchen table and went to water my plants. Lena texted around noon. "Hope you had fun last night. Kevin says you two will do a makeup dinner." "That's sweet." A smiley face at the end. I didn't respond to either of them. The following Tuesday, I heard from my neighbor Carol, whose daughter works for a corporate events company and knows the same circles Lena runs in. Lena had tried to book Anella's for a client lunch, the kind she posts about, the carefully lit table, and the "so grateful for wonderful colleagues" caption. The reservation had been politely declined. Fully booked, they told her, indefinitely. 2 days after that, Kevin's colleague Marcus, the one who organized the celebration dinner, apparently reached out to Dominic about a corporate account for their team's client dinners. He was told the restaurant wasn't taking new corporate accounts at this time. I found out about this secondhand, from Carol, who found out from her daughter, who heard it mentioned in passing at an event industry meeting. I didn't seek it out. It arrived the way most true things arrive quietly, through the back door, without announcement. Lena called on a Friday afternoon. Her voice had the particular clipped quality it gets when she is controlling something she'd rather throw. "Margaret," she said, "I feel like there might be some kind of misunderstanding. Kevin and I want to take you to dinner. Actually take you sit down together. All of us. This weekend, if you're free." I waited a beat. Where were you thinking? The pause that followed was small but full. We thought, Anella's, actually. I've been trying to. Another pause. Or somewhere else. Wherever you'd like. I'll think about it, I said. Of course. Another beat. Are you upset with us? I looked out the window at the backyard where I'd planted tulip bulbs the week before. Little brown, papery things that would become something else in the spring. I'm not upset, Lena, I said, which was the honest answer. I'm just paying attention. She didn't know what to do with that. Well, let us know about dinner. I told her I would and said goodbye and hung up and stood in my kitchen for a while in the particular quiet of a house that is your own, that no one can ask you to leave. Kevin came the following Thursday morning, alone. He didn't call ahead. I opened the door and he was standing on my porch in the jacket he wears on his days off, hands in his pockets. And he looked like the boy who used to come to the kitchen after bad days at school and not say anything, just sit at the counter and wait for me to notice. I let him in. I put on coffee. He sat at the same table where he'd done his homework for 9 years, the table I'd bought secondhand and refinished myself the summer he was 12. He didn't apologize right away. He looked at his hands for a while. Then he said, Lena says you've been quiet. I poured the coffee and set his cup in front of him. I've always been quiet, I said. You know what I mean. I sat down across from him. I know what you mean. He looked up. There was something behind his eyes that I recognized as the oldest version of him, the 9-year-old version, the one who still believed I could fix things. I should have come to get you, he said. At the bar, I should have come and sat with you. Yes, I said. You should have. He was quiet. He picked up his coffee and set it down without drinking. Did you talk to someone at the restaurant? Someone from the management? I held his gaze. I ran into an old friend. He absorbed that. Lena can't book there anymore. I know. Mom. Kevin. I kept my voice level, the way I kept it level in hospital rooms when I needed someone to stay calm long enough to hear what I was saying. I watched you receive the biggest professional recognition of your career. I sat at the bar alone and watched you toast your success with people who have known you for 3 years. And then you left me a $20 bill and drove to the next party. He opened his mouth and then closed it. I have been at your house 4 days a week for 3 years, I said. I signed for your car. I wired you money I haven't seen back. I have loved your children with every part of myself. Not because I wanted payment. Because they are mine to love and you are mine to love. I paused. But I am not nothing, Kevin. I was never nothing. And you let her make me feel like I was. He looked like something inside him was collapsing slowly, the quiet, structural kind. I know, he said finally. I know, Mom. I don't want an apology, I said. I want you to understand the difference between being inconvenient and being invisible. You treated me as though I was both. He didn't argue. He didn't defend Lena, which told me something. He just sat there at my kitchen table with his coffee going cold, the way he used to sit when the thing he was carrying was larger than his words for it. After a while, I refilled his cup. He stayed for the better part of an hour. When he stood to leave, I walked him to the door and we stood in the frame for a moment. Not quite hugging, not quite not. The $3,000, he said suddenly. I'll transfer it this week. I nodded once. And I'll talk to Lena about the other things. I didn't tell him what to say or what to expect. That was his work to do, not mine. After he left, I went back to the kitchen and stood at the counter and looked at the yard through the window, the tulip beds, the tree I planted the year he started high school that was now taller than the house. I thought about Elena Ferrara saying I had given her back her appetite for living, and about the $20 bill still in my coat pocket, and about all the ways we measure what we're owed that turn out to be the wrong measurement. I wasn't looking for payback. I had never been looking for that. I was looking for the simple, plain acknowledgement that after 64 years of showing up for patients, for my son, for grandchildren who knew my face before they knew my name, I was still a person worth a seat at the table. That's not a complicated thing to want. Later that evening, I called Dominic to thank him. He said, "You don't need to thank me for anything," in a tone that meant he was glad I had called. I asked about the restaurant, about his family, about the younger cousin who had apparently started cooking with him. We talked for almost an hour. Before we hung up, he said, "Come in for dinner sometime, Margaret. Come in the front door. I'll have a table for you." I told him I would. I meant it. I keep the coat in my closet now, the dark green one. The $20 bill is still in the pocket. I don't spend it, and I don't throw it away. It's not a keepsake, exactly. It's more like a receipt proof of a transaction I didn't agree to, from an evening that cost me something I chose not to waste. Here's what I know after 64 years. The people who love you don't leave you at the bar, and the people who take from you without asking will always be surprised, in the end, when you stop having anything left to give. I have one question for you before you go. Have you ever been made to feel like a convenience by someone you would have done anything for? And if you had one quiet move left, just one, would you have used it?